Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of World of Darkness News. This one with a very special guest that is joining me actually from few streets away from the Paradox offices, from Fast Travel Games. We're going to talk more about Wraith, the Oblivion Afterlife. I said this right this time. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into the mechanics of the game and about the application of Wraith the Oblivion setting in the upcoming VR game from Fast Travel Games. We also have a lot of the Werewolf news today, and we also have a very special Crusader Kings news for you guys. And I'm going to talk about the mod Princess of Darkness for Crusader Kings 3, the mod that you may probably know from CK2 already, and the awesome stuff that the modders did with the third version of the game and the new mod. These are all the topics that we're going to cover today. When it comes to Werewolf itself, we're going to also talk about the newest trailer, which uncovers a little bit more about the story of Kahal of Tribe Fianna, the protagonist of the game. And we're also going to remind you how fierce and aggressive was the gameplay trailer for Earthblood, because I think that these two very much fill each other's gaps very beautifully, and you can get a better glimpse on the game using these two. And we're going to also give you the very last chance to play Heart of the Forest demo using the Steam keys, which are available on Steam right now, and also give you the new update from the developers in their dev diary. But we're going to start with the Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife and interview with Eric, who is going to join me in just a moment. Let me see if Eric is there. Hello, Eric.
Hello. Hi.
Nice to see you in there. There we go.
Nice to see you. Hello. Hi.
Hello. You are a second guest in a row that we're having with a very beautiful collection of games behind you. I'm just like, I've noticed it just right
Yeah.
now.
It's my collection of board games and role-playing games in my home office here.
That's wonderful. So we're
Yeah.
going to start, with the very basics. Could you please introduce yourself to our audience and tell them what is your role on the development of Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife?
Yes. So I'm Erik Odaldal. I'm the creative director and writer at Fast Travel Games. It's a VR game developer in Stockholm, just a couple of blocks away from Paradox, actually. So in the development of Wraith Afterlife, I oversee all the design, write the script, and help direct actors and stuff like that.
I see. That's wonderful. And let's actually start with the concept itself. We were talking a little bit about it briefly in one of the previous interviews that we are doing in the news show, but I want to hear it in your words. How did you approach translating Rave the Oblivion setting to the VR game?
So, first of all, for Fast Travel Games, it's all about being in first person and really having a proper presence in VR. So we wanted the player to be a dead man walking around in a large setting and discover it. We also said that we think that Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife should be a proper horror game. It's about experiencing death. As a fairly new wraith, as a wraith sees the Shadowlands for the first time, and I guess that's where we started. And because for wraiths, what happened before they died is equally as important as what happens after they died. So of course, constructing the life of the protagonist, the main person you're going to play, has been a lot of the work went into that.
Yeah, and actually, from the gameplay trailer that you've released just last week, I was able to see the mechanics of how movement in VR is going to work and how we're going to
Yeah.
actually interact with our environment. So, was this something that you also had, Rave the Oblivion in mind when you were developing this, or what was your approach?
Well, wraiths have a very clear physical presence in the
Yes.
world. So there's tons of stuff you can interact with, but they also, I mean, they are otherworldly creatures, right? So we want to let the player interact with the world in other different ways, and yeah, like for instance, the Wraith can see and hear very clearly, right? So and use their sharpened senses to find their way around, and use all kinds of different Wraith powers.
Yeah, we're going to get back to the Wraith powers later on,
Oh,
because
so
like
I'll save that for.
yeah, in general,
okay.
I do want to like ask you a little bit more in-depth questions about the Wraith lore today,
Yeah.
but I think it's going to be a very good introduction for our watchers who do not know a lot about Wraith to talk about how is Afterlife going to serve as the introduction to the setting. Was this in plans? You know, like are we planning to make the Afterlife the gateway for people to actually play the tabletop?
Yes, I mean that's one of the hopes I have with this. So I think when we started out, thinking about what the game should be, we very early said that okay, let's stick to one setting. There's this vast, wonderful underworld in Wraith the Oblivion, but we were afraid of we don't want to throw people straight into that. There's tons of lore, and like there's 25 years or more, no, 30, almost 30 years of lore, and people are so invested in that. But we want to introduce people to the world of Wraiths. So we are going to be in one specific setting. It's the Barclay Mansion, and it's the Shadowlands mirror version of the real Los Angeles Barclay Mansion, and of course the Shadowlands is a different place. Time works differently and stuff like that. So and by doing that, we can gradually reveal the world to new players, and hopefully give players who've known about Wraith for ages and ages something that they recognize from the pen and paper books. But also introduce a lot of the concepts that are important to Wraith the Oblivion. And exactly how much we're introducing and how we're doing that, I'm going to wait a bit to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Since we're tweaking and testing and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I really like the approach that we've heard from the developers from your studio before, that the game is going to be a very good introduction, but at the same time it's going to have a lot of little tidbits which are going to be knowledgeable, known for people who played Wraith the Oblivion back in the days and who actually are accustomed to the setting itself. So I recommend you guys, people, if you want to, like before the game, if you want to jump onto Wraith train, to check out the 20th anniversary edition and see what's in there in the lore, because that was one of the main inspirations, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and that's a wonderful book, by the way. But also some of the other supplemental books that were released in the 90s. I basically poured through everything and made a couple of
notes here and there.
Yeah,
we're going to use that.
Let's do this and let's do that, and I think I think the one thing that is the most important to me about Wraith is the player's connection and relationship to his shadow. So I think that that is a very important part of
Before
the game.
we're going to talk about the shadow, I actually, because I want to talk about the player itself, because shadow is of course like an important part, but this is probably the very first horror game I will ever play, or even a horror media that I will consume, which is told from a story of a dead person. And it's such a weird and unusual approach to horror, where you are actually playing something that usually people are afraid of. So what was that design-wise? I can only imagine that it was a completely different mindset in writing than it would be with just playing as a human.
Yeah, I actually really stuck to the World of Darkness. Games about personal horror. Right. So I think, yes, the Wraiths can be very, very scary. But specters can be very, very scary to Wraiths as well. So there's always something that is worse than you are.
I mean, it's the same with vampire, actually. For people who are, most knowledgeable about vampire in the chat or in the YouTube audience, you may be a very creepy monster, but there are more creepy monsters out there.
There's always something worse. So I think we're gonna have tons of stuff that is really scary. I hope it's really scary for people. But it's also important that our protagonist is called Ed Miller. He's a photographer. He dies for a certain reason that might you might learn while playing the game.
Okay.
And it was important for me that Ed isn't this shining perfect example of a human being. He's right. So he, you know what, he brings his life with him into his death as well. And we're sticking stuff like that. You know, he has his fetters and stuff like that from the pen and paper, and basically his history is very important. And his history is not necessarily, he hasn't been the nicest person.
I see.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very World of Darkness, so I absolutely can get behind that. And I actually, of course, wonder, he has a history, he has, a list of past sins, but he also has a friend, which is the Shadow. So what is the
Yes.
relationship with the Shadow in the game?
So
And
this is
I feel like we could maybe very quickly start with your words. Can you explain the Shadow to people who have never played Wraith? What is a Shadow?
yeah. So the shadow is, so when a person dies in Wraith the Oblivion and comes back or comes to the underworld as a wraith, his soul kind of gets split into. One is his psyche, and in the pen and paper games, that's what's being controlled by a player. And the other part, I guess you could call it his dark subconscious, is the shadow. And that is a creature that it knows everything about the psyche, about the player, and it basically embodies all your darkest drives, and it exists only to make you fail.
I killed the friend at first. I'm drawing it back.
But in the game, the thing is, he's not just an outright enemy. That would be boring. He knows everything. He knows what you think. He knows what you want. Sometimes he's helpful, right? And sometimes he's not. And because it's a video game, this creates a very interesting dynamic about, okay, so he's actually helping me now. What's his plan, really? And so he'll be with you for the whole game. He'll be talking to you. He might be berating you for stuff, but he'll guide you in subtle ways.
I see. And
Like
there's
that.
no way to get rid of it, unfortunately.
No, that's a big problem, right?
Yeah, but also, it's interesting how this dynamic is going to work, given that the Shadow is going to be kind of our instructor in the game, kind of a guide, and so you cannot really trust your guide. So that's going to create a very interesting energy.
Yeah, I think so. I really hope so. I think it's going to be really cool. And we just recorded the voiceover for the Shadow just a couple of days ago, and I think we're listening to him and his vocal presence is very commanding and very. I mean, he's a scary person to have around you as you play as well.
I love it. I cannot wait to hear the scary voice in my head as I walk around Berkeley Mansion. But as you did a wonderful job explaining Shadow to our audience, let's move to another mechanic from Wraith the Oblivion, and that is the Pathos.
Yes.
So what is Pathos?
So Path is it is your I guess you could call it's your emotional power. It's the power a wraith has that feeds his abilities and basically the supernatural stuff he can do. Of course, this is an important thing for us as well in the game, and you'll be using Pathos in different ways, and you can earn Pathos by basically completing objectives in the pen and paper game as well. So we're experimenting with stuff like that. We're very much in the process of tweaking and checking out how we're gonna do this in a way that feels natural for the player. Also, because it's a VR game, we don't want to overburden the player with tons of UI and stuff. It doesn't necessarily feel great in VR. So we're figuring out how to communicate it properly, etc.
I see.
But it's there, just like Corpus is, of
Mm.
course. Yeah.
Good to know. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for explaining. And actually, talking about mechanics, I've heard already about the free Wraith powers that were introduced in Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife, and that is Wraith Grasp, Sharpened Senses, and Insubstantiality. Could you tell us a little
Yeah.
bit more about these?
Yes, I mean we can begin with sharpened senses. So in the pen and paper game and in our game, wraiths have a very clear vision. They can see things from very far away. They can hear things if they concentrate, and this is called sharpened senses. And we're using that in the game to basically let the player find their way around, to find where the most next. This is a game in Barclay Mansion, and Barclay Mansion will open up gradually for you. This means that there's tons of free roaming you can do. We don't tell you all the time that you need to do this next and that next. So you're going to be using your sharpened senses to basically find your way around and find which is the next interesting spot maybe for me to check out, or go further into the story. And since it's a VR game, you will actually have your hands to do that and look around. And Wraith Grasp is it's a telekinetic power. You can lift heavy objects. Once again, using your hands, right, in VR. Lift heavy objects and move them out of the way, etc., or throw them around, stuff like that. And Insubstantiality, well, wraiths can move through physical objects, right? It hurts them, but they can. And we also said that if we're going to build a horror game, where you play as a dead person, you need to be able to walk through walls. I think we felt that was one of the first things we did. We quickly realized that if you could walk through every wall in the building, the game wouldn't be very fun. So we figured out a way for you to do that. But
there are, I mean, a lot of people are using no clip to play literally any game.
Yeah,
I was personally
exactly.
playing Bloodlines 1 with no clip a lot because I was getting stuck in the doors. So.
that can work. It's also a way, unfortunately, for those that don't want to, if you play with no clip, you usually know what you're doing and you know why.
Yes.
But it's also a way to maybe break the story for yourself. It's a storytelling game, right? We want to tell a very gripping story as well. And both Wraith Grasp and Insubstantiality is actually used in a kind of, I'm going to say very light, like a Metroidvania thing that allows you to open up the mansion for the player as you play through the game.
Yeah, and actually, there's a question from our chat about this, and I want to reiterate it a little bit. Is there going to be any limit to us using our powers, or are we going to have these free powers, to be able to use them anytime we want?
So we will gradually introduce these powers to you. That's what once again, it's we don't want to give you everything. You boot up the game and you can do everything. So we introduce them to you as you play the game. But once you've learned them, you will be able to use them.
I see.
And that's where the whole pathos thing comes in, because if you run out of pathos, that's not a very good thing for a wraith. So we need to give the player ways to get that back, etc. Some of these powers will consume pathos and some won't.
I see. And also there's a question about the inspirations that you have taken for the game. I know that there were some other video games that you were inspired by, but also people are asking whether some movies inspired you, or books, like The Shining, for example.
It's hard to not be inspired by The Shining.
Yes.
Both the book and the movie. I think I read it when I was 11 the first time.
Ooh, that's early.
It scared the hell out of me. But it's definitely, I think we've been looking a lot at so many horror movies. But one thing we said we didn't want to do is there's a lot of really scary ghost movies, but they very often take place in like Gothic mansions, and they're basically late 18th century places. And we wanted a bit more modern take on this. But I mean, personally, I was a big fan of the Haunting on Hill House TV series on Netflix.
Oh, me too.
And one of the really, really cool things about that series wasn't even the story, which was great, but the fact that they hid ghosts in so many frames, and they didn't make any noise about it. The camera just panned, and there, was there somebody in the background?
It's so scary when you actually get to see the screenshots and learn afterwards how many ghosts were in that series. It's creepy.
That is very inspirational for us. And I think what we're doing with Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife is we don't want to make a game that's all about jump scares. That's one thing we set out. That was one of the first, that key value words. Like no jump scares.
I appreciate it very much.
no cheap jump scares. It's also almost impossible to make a horror thing without somebody eventually getting scared. So we're basically building a mood that gets scarier and scarier, and we want to let you think you see things all the time. And sometimes you might actually see things; they might be there, and another time you might imagine it because So we're going to do that a lot.
That is something that I feel I'm going to love, but also be really afraid of.
Yes.
Have you actually? Because I know that you played the game. You're testing the game in the office. So did you have any extreme reactions so far?
I mean, we have people on the team that they don't want to play the game. It's too scary. So personally, I'm a bit jaded. I've been, I read The Shining when I was 11. I've been collecting horror movies, and I've read horror stories for my entire life. In my personal life, outside game development, I write horror stories, published a couple of short stories and stuff like that. So for me, I think it's hard to scare me. I've been scared by our game as well, especially when the audio team has added a new thing, or level design has changed something and I wasn't aware of it, etc. But we have some people on the team that have been really, really scared.
I am even more scared thinking about this, but now I really want to just go these couple blocks away and play this game now.
But it's a balance, because we have to, we have to let people relax at times as well, especially in VR, because VR makes everything even scarier as well. You're looking around corners and stuff like that.
Oh, I can imagine this. Oh my God. Especially there's no escape, like you turn your head around, you are in front of a monitor, you're in front of a TV, you can always grab a pillow and just like that's how I'm watching horror movies. I'm just like, I'm of course like, I love horror movies. I'm totally not scared. Absolutely. The pillow is just there as a prop, and I can always just hide my face in it. But in VR, that is not possible.
No, it's no, exactly. And it's and what we've always said, we can't build a horror game and half-ass it. We have to make something that we believe is going to be truly scary, but there has to be a balance as well. and I'm not saying it's but I mean, a good horror story needs elements of everything. It actually needs love. It needs other moods than just stark terror all the time, right? So hopefully we'll have sprinkles of that as well.
Speaking of love, I need to mention that our live audience, for some reason, turned out to be very thirsty of the shadow after we started talking about it, and there was a question whether you would imagine romancing your own shadow.
No.
Well, for watchers watching at home, you can always, write your own fan fictions of Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife. Speaking of writing, you really sparked my interest with mentioning your horror stories, and I'm sure that our watchers would also like to see them. Where can we read the stories that you have written?
So most of it is in Swedish. There's a couple of them are actually. So I'm part of a writers collective called Fruktan in Swedish. It's called, I think we're calling ourselves Nordic Fear or something like that when we translate it. We're available on Spotify So a lot of it has been recorded. I think there are like 4 or 5 albums there you can listen to. Fruktan on Spotify. There's also a couple of books published. We have one called Stockholm's Undergång, which is in Swedish. It's about 11 stories about the downfall of Stockholm through all. Yeah, and in my story, there's like a demonic infestation in Skärholmen outside. So
now I need to learn Swedish. I mean, I'm learning Swedish anyway, but I really want to learn it so I can read more horror stories. I've also heard that it's actually there's a very big scene in Sweden of horror writers, and in general, people are very much into these themes here, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of us. Like I guess you'd call us indie horror writers. There's of course some great big horror writers as well, but there's tons of writers that publish short stories and or novels, and there's a good amount of small publishers that publish these things as well. So it's that is actually really cool. It's growing. It's more and more horror all the time.
That sounds great. I'm very happy I moved in here. More and more happier every time I hear stuff like this. So thank you so much for telling me both about your writing and about Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife writing. I am just getting more curious about this game right now. And I need to ask you, when are we going to learn more about Wraith, and where can we follow you to get these news?
So we'll be speaking more about Afterlife all through this autumn, and we will eventually release the game in early 2021 is what we're saying now. We'll talk more about that. So you should check out our homepage, fasttravelgames.com. You can find about Afterlife there. There's also Fast Travel Game and Wraith Afterlife on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook as well. So I think we're everywhere, like a shadow following you everywhere. Stalking you.
Oh my god, now I'm going to be afraid to check your social media. Thank you so much for promoting this way. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me, Eric. I would love to visit you guys one day and play Wraith.
Yeah, and you shall.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
And have a nice day. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for letting me be here.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys, I'm going to get everything set in here, and we are ready to move forward to the next topic about our game. By the way, for those of you who ask questions, thank you so much for sending more questions to Eric about the specific mechanics of the game. I think it's a little bit too early to talk about them just yet, but don't worry, this is not the last time we're going to have Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife news on the news show. We're going to for sure cover it more in the future, and then we're going to get more and more in depth into the mechanics as the game is getting closer to release, which, as Eric said, is going to happen in early 2021. Speaking of releases, we're going to cover more of them today and remind you about some of the closest upcoming releases. But next year in February, we have Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood, which has just gotten the new trailer. Just last week, I believe. It was, it's kind of fresh. So if you haven't seen it yet, if you've missed it from the IGN show, let's rewatch it right now. that was the new trailer for Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood that was going a little bit in depth into the background of Cahal. You could actually see some little tidbits from his past and from his pack, about which I'm not going to tell you too much because I'm going to spoil the game. But this is the story part of the game, and this trailer is called, a cinematic one. But people who are watching it, I've seen a lot of the comments asking about the gameplay itself. And of course, there was also the gameplay trailer for Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood, which I think is really filling the gaps, and showing you how, this shows you how the story looks like. And there's also a trailer which shows you how the gameplay itself is going to play out. And it has one of my favorite songs of this month, at least. Previous month and this month. Yeah, we are in a new month right now because of September. But one of my favorite lately songs, Alien Weaponry, Kai Tangata. Let's check it out.
Peggy 18.
It's a very good question to ask yourself. When will you awoo? Because Cahal and his backstory will give you a lot of reasons to awoo. And this game, as one of the developers told us in the interview that we had about Earthblood in one of the past episodes of World of Darkness News, is very much about letting out steam and destroying this freaking Endron, which is a subsidiary of Pentex. And the ways of destroying Endron are aplenty, and it really feels like being a werewolf where you are just turning into a Krynos form and destroying everything. And the game is going to be playable from the standpoint of 3 different forms. As Cahal, you can be human and interact with people, talk with people, interact with electronic devices, with laptops, with panels on the walls and stuff like that. You can also be a wolf, where you are a little wolf and you are getting around in a very stealthy and quick way, being able to squeeze through the tight spaces. So this is a very good way to actually sneaking past the guards. But if you are tired of sneaking, if you're tired of trying to talk to people, you can always go into Krynos and just destroy everything on your way. And Rage, the Rage mechanic, which is going to be explored in the game, and it's going to be useful in the battle. But Rage in the Werewolf the Apocalypse has the price. And how that price is going to look like and be paid in the game itself, you're going to see in more gameplay. But so far, we have plenty of trailers for Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood coming. We had the initial teasers during ParadoxCon, then the cinematic trailer, which is getting a little bit more in-depth in the story of the game. Cahal trailer, which is going deeper into Cahal as a protagonist, and of course, the gameplay trailer where you rage. I have to say that the combat in this game looks absolutely fun, and I really hope that you guys are going to enjoy it yourself as you play it. So, speaking of werewolf, we're going to have very much of a werewolf focus today on the stream, and we're going to jump over to the second Werewolf the Apocalypse game, which was announced, but the first one that is going to come out, as it's still going to come out this year in the upcoming release, Heart of the Forest. is right now available to download from Steam for free as a demo. You can actually play it. So there are 2 remaining hours, or actually less, just 1 hour and a half to download this game from Steam and play it. Of course, you can download it and play it later, but the download option is going to disappear in 1 hour 30 minutes. So I am urging you, if you haven't played it yet, check it out, especially as if you have seen either me or other influencers playing this game already. I did play it on my stream, and I've seen a lot of YouTube videos of it. There are different ways of playing it and different outcomes. So some people are not even like having the same characters that you meet in the game as NPCs. Some people have totally different encounters. This game is very much of a branch, and the demo is showing that very well. There's a lot of different ways of approaching things, and depending on whether you play with low rage or high rage, you have different options to choose as the character. It's a visual novel with a lot of the mechanics underlying underneath the text surface. There's a character sheet which displays you the choices that you make, which are crafting your character in the end. You're playing as Maya. She's the American woman of the Polish descent, and she's getting back to Poland, basically. I mean, she's never been there, but she's going to Poland to discover the truth about her roots. She is exploring the forest, the puszcza of Białowieża that she dreamt about for a long time, and she doesn't know what exactly brought her there, but I was playing this game recently with a high rage, and it was a very, very fun experience. I did 2 playthroughs so far for the demo with the low and high rage, and they were different, and I enjoyed both of them very much. Wraith, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Heart of the Forest devs are sharing their dev diaries every single week on Wednesdays, and I love showing them to you guys because they're getting in depth into what exactly drove their mindset in development of this game. And we have yet another dev diary that they shared, which is talking a little bit more about developing the game in the existing setting. So let's watch it.
We're making a game that exists within an established universe. This has its advantages because you know what you have to do, but also disadvantages in the form of boundaries you have to stay within. But for us, this isn't anything new. The other co-creator of the game is Jacek, whom I worked with on the first The Witcher game, and early on The Witcher 2. Making standalone games within existing worlds isn't a new situation for us, and I think it suits us well. There are times when limitations support creativity. It's an interesting thought experiment to try and tell something about the Białowieża forest in a game created somewhere else, in a different time, while staying within the scope of Werewolf the Apocalypse.
Please go to Steam or GOG and wishlist this game right now. This really helps the developers to see whether you are interested in it or not, and developers really gain a lot of discoverability on their platforms with their game being added to your wishlist. So I recommend that in the first hand, but second of all, as usually I do recommend to check out their social media, because I love how Earthblood developers and Heart of the Forest developers, totally 2 different groups, are just, either trolling each other or just basically joining together in the werewolf love on Twitter. There's a lot of very fun threads that they're doing, and it's really fun to read them. So I love the little energy going on in between these 2 teams. It's really fun. Go to Steam and download the demo right now. It's going to be available for the next hour and a half, and if you download it now, you can play it anytime. So if you'll have time during the weekend, you can just download it now and have it in your library already. So that is Heart of the Forest, but now I think it's a very good chance to jump back to Vampire. We really had an episode with a lot of werewolf this time, but but now we're going to talk about vampire and about something that the whole Paradox is celebrating this week, and that is the release of Crusader Kings 3. But we're not going to talk about Crusader Kings 3 in itself that much. We're going to talk about vampires. Let me just... there we go. There we are. Princess of Darkness. I'm going to put this on, see if this actually fits. It's a little bit weird with the headset, but I think it works very well. And let's talk about Princess of Darkness. For those of you who played Crusader Kings 2 and who were interested in mods regarding Vampire the Masquerade, you may have already heard this name. Princess of Darkness was a total conversion mod for Crusader Kings 2, which was basically changing the game into a Dark Ages Vampire the Masquerade strategy, which is great. And as Crusader Kings 3 has just released, Princess of Darkness has also made its way to the game, and you can play its new version in Crusader Kings 3 now. You can download it and check it out. There's there's a lot of things going into this mod. It's extremely in-depth, but before we'll go into the actual breakdown of what the mod conveys, I'm not going to tell you about everything because there's just so much, but I will give you some pretty interesting pinpoints. Let's very quickly just talk about Crusader Kings 3 and what it is, for those of you guys who haven't played the grand strategies just yet. Crusader Kings 3 is the grand strategy in which you, of course, build your own dynasty throughout the medieval ages, but there's a lot of things that happen alongside. You reshape the history of the world in the way that you're crafting it in the game. You are experiencing a lot of drama. Just check out any Crusader Kings 3 stream and you will not know what I'm talking about. And of course, you choose your own setting by picking, a specific, you can play as either the countries, either the dynasties, and there's a lot of ways in which you can approach the game yourself as a player. And this all translates into Princess of Darkness. When it comes to choosing your own setting, you're playing as the prince, and this prince can be of many different backgrounds, clans, houses, which are the groups within the clans. So, for example, in Princess of Darkness, one of the first questions that the game asks you is about Cain, and you can, of course, say that yes, all vampires come from Cain, but you can also say, frick this, vampires come from Seth, and this, of course, is going to affect the clan that your vampire overlord is going to have. And playing as a prince, the game starts in the 1230. So this is the time, the classic start of the World of Darkness, Dark Ages, and it takes actually inspiration from a lot of the different Vampire the Masquerade settings, from Dark Ages through V20 to V5. So all of these settings are inspired. The game is inspired by all of them, and there's a lot of the very interesting V5 mechanics which the mod developers put into that. For example, experience in this mod is interpreted as the blood resonance, and you can gain it passively or actively by hunting humans of the specific resonance. So drinking from just anyone is not going to help you. You have to be picky about who you feed from. You can, of course, embrace childer, and there's a lot of drama that is going into that. So if you want some family drama in your little vampire family and vampire dynasty, just go and embrace childer. There are also great persons who are spawning throughout the history, which are historical figures that you can embrace as your childer. So you can imagine how many options this gives you. There's tons of events that pop up throughout the game, which are fully based on Vampire the Masquerade lore. There's a hunger system, which means that whenever you invoke a discipline, there's a percentage of a chance that your hunger will increase, and playing with a higher hunger gives you various debuffs and penalties for the game. So you need to keep a track of your hunger, similarly to how you have to do that in the V5 TTRPG. There are also predator types, so similarly to V5, when you pick the alley cat or sandman or siren as your predator type, you do it a little bit differently by answering questions that Princess of Darkness gives you, and this also defines a lot of the parts of your gameplay. the mechanic of religions in Crusader Kings 3 is interpreted into what might be known from the legacy Vampire the Masquerade paths and roads of enlightenment. So they all have their own tenets and crimes. And for example, diablery, which is also in the mod, is something that is against most of the paths and breaks the tenets of most of the roads. So if you are diablerizing another leader, another vampire leader, you might be blackmailed by others, you might be executed, or you might also be, of course, haunted by the soul of the vampire that you consumed. So diablery is similarly risky as it is in the tabletop, but it is absolutely a mechanic in the game, and you can use that. Also, it's one fun tidbit for LA by Night fans. The authors of the mod were inspired by Jason Scarl's storytelling in the way that they interpreted the beast voice in the game, and that is the voice which, in red text, it either speaks to you or you speak through it, or the beast speaks through you in this way to other leaders. So this may be also tied to the hunger mechanic, but I don't know that yet. I'm going to delve deeper into this mod and for sure play it myself and check it out. What more? I mean, this mod has so much depth. The developers went so deep to incorporate so much lore, actual characters from Vampire the Masquerade. There are the adventurers, which are basically famous characters from the lore of Vampire the Masquerade, spawning throughout the ages and taking leadership over certain areas. So you may find a lot of the people that you know from Vampire the Masquerade lore in this mod. It is, of course, a mod for Crusader Kings 3. It's on the separate game, so you need to own Crusader Kings 3 to get the mod. And it is unofficial. It is made accordingly to the Dark Pack agreement. By the way, great. I am not keeping this crown on my head. Unfortunately, maybe I'm not meant to be a queen. That's fine. I'm just going to hold it in my hands. So something that was added recently to our Dark Pack agreement is that the mods for Paradox games are, absolutely made in accordance to the Dark Pack. You can make them, you can have fun with them, and Princess of Darkness is made in accordance to that. And it's made by a group of extremely enthusiastic, amazing people who they have their Discord, they have their own community in which they are constantly developing the game and making it better. I've also seen on their Discord that they are having some of the character submissions that they're putting in the game. So head on to there and check out the community. They're doing a lot of amazing stuff, and I am totally going to play Princess of Darkness, as I always dreamt about having a grand strategy Vampire the Masquerade game, and this is the closest that we have as for now. And I am very happy that this mod happened. So thank you so much to developers of this mod for making it come true. And for those of you who played Crusader Kings 2 and the mod, it had some changes, improvements, so it is more in line with the Crusader Kings 3 mechanics. It made use of the various things that Crusader Kings 3 introduced, so you may see some differences, but I hope they will be all super fun for you. I am personally going to jump onto the deep waters and start playing CK3 with this mod and see how this is going to go, and basically have the Vampire the Masquerade experience in it from the get-go. That's the plan. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions, and I will be very happy to jump in and answer them on our Discord later on. So discord.gg/World of Darkness is the address under which you can find all of our community and myself lurking and reading you and answering your questions. I'll be very happy to be there to answer anything that you guys have, and I am totally going to play and probably stream this mod throughout the weekends. You can expect that happening. Thank you so much for joining today, and that was all. I'm going to meet you next week for more World of Darkness news with a new guest and with new news upcoming from World of Darkness world. And as for now, don't get lost in the night, and see you another time.